Hi, everybody. Welcome to the FinOps on Azure podcast. Today, we're joined by Alexander Golev from SAM Expert. And Alexander's got a really awesome YouTube channel with, I think you're up about 20-odd thousand subscribers last time I checked. So Alexander talks about lots of licensing and cost-related stuff, and really, one of the industry experts in that area. So it's really great to have him join us on the podcast today. So thanks for joining us, Alexander.
Thanks, Mike. That's not the first time we're talking. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, definitely. So we, at Turbo 360, we recently had Alexander join us for a webinar, and we just had a really good conversation, and there was lots of really quite insightful things Alexander was saying, and I invited him to come join us on the podcast for a more casual conversation, just chatting about where we are in the world today in terms of cost management, licensing, and those kind of things. And I thought we'd just have a bit of a chat, and it would be quite interesting. So, Alexander, just to kick off, I guess for anybody who's not come across you before, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I myself have been around Microsoft since the early 90s, and about 2005, they introduced me to software asset management, and I worked alongside Microsoft for a while. And then with my new brand, SAM Expert, we went completely independent. Just we don't want to have any strings attached. We deliberately don't sell any licenses. We consult about Microsoft cost savings, and we can actually tell you the truth without thinking, what will Microsoft say about that? Yeah, and that's effectively what we are. We're a focused Microsoft cost-related consultants. Any kinds of Microsoft costs you can think of.
I think it's a really interesting one, that as well, because I remember back in my consultancy days having that independence where you don't have the conflict of interest that you're trying to sell somebody the particular license. Puts you in a really good position to give that advice in a trusted way, doesn't it?
Yes, and when you are any company's partner, even if you're not dependent on sales, there's always some kind of partner code of conduct. So you can't say certain things. You have what's in the spy world? What's it called? Handler. You have a handler in Microsoft who actually watches you quite closely. And if you post something wrong on LinkedIn, wrong quote unquote, they can give you a call and ask you to kindly remove that post or bear the consequences. So this is exactly what we wanted to avoid.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's proven a very good business model.
Yeah, it's that kind of customer first idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
So in terms of cost management and licensing, there's so much crazy stuff going on all the time. Everything's changing all the time. Tell me where you're at generally, what things are interesting you at the moment.
Azure Arc, SQL Server with Azure Arc and Windows Server with Azure Arc, I think are the most interesting bits right now, because what they are is, they are an amalgamation of the traditional licensing and Azure. So you still have your on-premises service, or you can take SQL, you can take it to any service provider as bring your own license, but effectively you're not bringing any licenses. There are no more licenses. If you deploy it with Azure Arc, you have your on-premise server, so it didn't disappear, but now you're paying for that usage through Azure on a pay-as-you-go model. It may run 24/7, but it's a pay-as-you-go model anyway. If you shut it down, you don't pay for it. It's billed per hour. And it's a bit of a mind twist, because if you look at the financials in an enterprise agreement, the percentage of on-prem, because you can only see the licenses, is tiny. But the instances still exist. And we can see, because the way Microsoft very aggressively priced it, we actually see a pretty good adoption. And because it's a flagship product, it's being actively pushed. And right now you can secure pretty good discounts on it, which you probably won't get again in the next 3 years. But at least for 3 years, you can have a pretty good offer. So that is And why why am I mentioning this is because now it's become an Azure expense. It all goes through that FinOps managed channel with its commitments and FinOps processes and procedures. It is a very interesting development.
Do you think so? The customers you're seeing kind of using that, do you think that they're kind of well positioned to leverage the benefits of that? Because I could imagine there's a lot of customers where some of them will be really happy to adopt that because they're used to cloud, but I guess a few of the other ones may struggle to understand the benefits because the license model is different. Is that something where you think there's a big education piece?
The licensing model is the same. It's the way you pay for it is different. You don't commit up front to consume 1,000 licenses. You just say, I'm going to pay as I go, as I deploy. I increase the estate, my payments go up. I decrease the estate, watching in the corner of my eye that I still hit my commitments. But I pay less for SQL in that case. So the paradigm is different, and it actually doesn't have those typical cloud-related traps either, because it's a simple product. You just use SQL Server on a certain number of cores. Because it's on premise, you're not billed for storage space, backups, and whatnot. So it's a pretty simple product to manage. But what I see is right now is I don't think customers fully grasp the benefits versus drawbacks. Yeah. It's driven mostly by two. What's the word I'm looking for? By two reasons. Let's use the word reasons here. One is if there's a massive discount offered by Microsoft, procurement will jump on it. And all IT needs to do is to install an Arc agent and connect it to their Azure tenant. Even in a massive estate, it can take a few days.
Yeah.
So for procurement, it's a win, although it may be a short-term win for the next 3 years. And as I said, very rarely discounts are prolonged or renewed in the same manner next time.
I guess the change to operational cost instead of big capital costs probably really good for cash flow there.
This whole discussion about CapEx versus OpEx, my first job was an accountant, and I spent some time with investment companies, a significant part of my life, supporting them, investing myself as well. It's such a subjective thing. To be honest, I don't want to go there. It's a kind of warmth. Yeah. So yes, it is a change from CapEx to OpEx. However, in the traditional licensing model, strictly speaking, software assurance that you're paying every 3 years on traditional licenses is an operational expenditure. It's possible with certain tweaks in your accounting to account that as a CapEx, but is it really? How do you depreciate that?
So I'm thinking less from the accountancy side of thing, actually, more from organizational politics, because I think in a lot of the places I've seen, the big challenge is, you kind of have to get that approval for budget to pay for something you're going to have to pay a significant chunk annually simply because it's above a threshold. But I think when I hear the Azure kind of Arc type payment model, you're much more in that per day, per month cost, which probably makes it much easier to get the approvals. So I think it's more the politics side where I think it probably helps IT departments.
Maybe. On the other hand, it's not a revolutionary change. So if you look at the modern day enterprise, somewhere around half of the Microsoft budget is cloud. So when they switch to SQL with Azure Arc, the increase is maybe 5 to 10%. It doesn't really shift the needle that much. So when a discount is offered, the adoption is almost a no-brainer. And the other reason it's adopted is some IT people really embraced the centralized management functionality with Arc, where you have everything in one console. You can see your SQL service better than with almost any other management tool. And it kind of comes for free. You actually can connect it to Arc without switching your licensing model. It's just a management interface. You have an option of them activating pay-as-you-go, but purely management capabilities. Some of them require software assurance or a subscription or Arc, but most of them, at least that centralized console, you get for free. So that's the second reason. So one is discounts. The other one is we just want to see our estate in a nice dashboard.
So what about other things that have kind of caught your eye at the minute, Alexander? So we've covered SQL Arc. What about things like some of the AI licensing changes and other stuff like that? Because we've noticed a big ramp up recently in people adopting AI. Yes. There's actually some really interesting stats actually at the conference we were at last week as well. I remember the Microsoft keynote was saying I think they said 70% of AI projects never leave non-production into production, which is quite an interesting statistic. And I think I do wonder if some of the challenges are understanding how to manage the cost on your AI solution. I think it's going to be an interesting one.
Only 70.
Well, yeah.
Well, it comes from Microsoft. They invested so much in AI. So I would take it with a pinch of salt. Definitely Microsoft is trying to drive that as well in the direction of pay-as-you-go. It's not just Copilot licenses anymore. $30 per user per month, which is countable. Quite easy to understand, isn't it? But now we have different layers, different flavors of Copilot itself, introduction of pay-as-you-go models. AI, agents are a completely new game. Agents are pay-as-you-go.
Yeah.
And formulas. The information is getting clearer and clearer daily, and quite rapidly. By the way, it's clarifying quite rapidly. But I remember the first weeks when this was introduced, and so many confused people all over the social media, on LinkedIn as well, professionals that specialize in AI. They were baffled by some of the licensing and cost calculations done by Microsoft. It took some time to figure out that, for example, a single prompt actually equals, I don't know, from 20 to 100 messages, but you're charged per message. It's a very complicated model. So at the same time, what we're seeing, negotiating for our clients, is we're seeing a bit of a disillusionment in Copilot as is. Some enterprises jump full in. Let's take 10,000 licenses. Let's take 100,000 licenses. I think Barclays Bank recently announced that they're taking Copilot almost for every employee of Barclays. And good luck with that. We'll see about it in 3 years. On the other hand, there's a lot of, I would say, early adopter interest in agentic AI. I would approach it cautiously, but I would certainly not discourage anybody trying it because, well, it's an interesting thing. I'm not sure whether the future is agentic, but it's another tool in your tool belt, and that is another subject for FinOps, for that daily, weekly, hourly consumption, which is even less predictable than anything else right now. How do you know?
Yeah, I think we were. So at the event we were at, there was a big thing from the Logic App team about their investment around agentic AI, which there's some really interesting stuff there because Logic Apps, as the agent hooking into the AI, you can plug in like a tools model into the Logic App, which makes it able to have the AI execute different bits dynamically in the Logic App, which is really quite powerful. But I know when we play around with AI for some of our R&D. It's kind of like it's managing that cost across customers. It's like, how do I manage the risk that I know one customer's not going to do something that blows the budget I've planned completely out the water because I didn't quite control what they were doing. So we were looking at some of the reservation options for AI, but it's difficult to understand. Obviously, if you take a reservation and you go away from the consumption model, you then must have some limits on the reservation to cover like how much you can actually use in a given period of time. And I think I was finding some of that's not really very clear as to kind of what the guardrails I've got to play within to leverage the reservation effectively.
With microtransactional reservations, what's the balance between I want to control my budget versus I want to make sure the thing works?
Yeah, 100%.
What if somebody overuses the limit, goes over the limit, and there's no allowance for overage?
Yeah.
Your entire business may suffer. So where is that balance? That's probably why, as far as I'm concerned, that normally in the cloud there are no mechanisms to actually stop the consumption, minus probably limits on your credit cards, like your spending limit. You could try and control it that way, sort of. It's still going to be reactive. So we're still catching up with some of the new Microsoft's initiatives because they're just quite a lot. If you look at the licensing front, nothing is going on there. You switch to the cloud front, AI and everything, there's an overwhelming stream of information and new bits and bobs, not necessarily connecting it to a concise picture. So as far as I remember from what I skimmed through and still somewhere and read later, there will be an option with agentic AI to actually prepay for a certain amount with a stop.
Yeah.
I'd like to see that working.
Yeah.
I'd like to see that working. You just basically prepay for a package of messages, and if you eat through that package of messages, it stops working.
Yeah.
I've been on the other side in IT, and I'll be very cautious about that, as well as overusing the budget.
So what about if we take a slight pivot away from technology for a second, if we talk more about the FinOps ecosystem. So how do you feel about the way organizations are adopting FinOps at the minute? Do you find the companies you work with are finding it really easy and straightforward? Are you thinking there's particular challenges that you regularly see in companies come across?
This pause will be long. I need to think how to respond to it.
Okay, we can edit your thinking time, take as long as you like. It's good to see those, but for me, it's good to hear the patterns that people see when you're talking to customers. Because if you imagine from my position, we talk to a lot of different types of customers, and it's really interesting where one minute you meet a company who's got a big investment in a team, try to do FinOps that are trying to like optimize, and then at the other end of the scale, we hear customers who don't even really know what FinOps is, but they've just got a cost problem and they're trying to figure out how do we start getting that under control. And then you get various bits in the middle. But it would be good to see when you have those probably deeper relationships with customers, like what sort of adoption challenges do you see?
It reminds me of the adoption of software asset management. It either doesn't exist or it's brilliant and there's a very good FinOps team and everything's under control. I would say on the scale of 1 to 5 across all our clients, FinOps is probably at about 2 right now. There are good early adopters with very strong teams. Mostly, this is where this kind of 2 out of 5 comes in. Mostly, everybody is in their baby steps around FinOps. So they may even have a team, they may even have a tool, they may even have some initiatives, but it's actually much easier as a consultant to deliver something around FinOps and SAM than to achieve the same as an internal team. I can't quite put my finger on why. Maybe because internal teams get bogged down in firefighting, continuous firefighting, because they need to do this strategic thing, but somebody called and said, we need to fix this immediately. There are so many vendors to manage, you can't really focus. And thus, this chaos creates lots of obstacles on the way to success. People are genuinely trying. What we see is, and I'm not even talking about us, if an internal consultancy comes in for a certain project, it gives it a very good kick. So you have those kind of jumps in the progress because the external team can concentrate on a specific task, or sometimes bring knowledge from other successful projects, because also visibility is better. So yeah, FinOps is taking traction. What some people don't understand is that actually FinOps is not cost optimization. It's much bigger. Cost optimization is a tiny bit of FinOps. Obviously, an integral part of FinOps. You can have cost optimization without implementing the entire FinOps, as you could have pretty good software management outcomes without actually having some during that epoch. So just to answer your question, it's all over the place. You can't say, everybody's somewhere here. Some people are at the beginning of the road. Some people are, I wouldn't say at the end of the road. There's no end, by the way. there's no cake, but they're doing a pretty good job.
So what are the, so if you think of the customers you see that you feel do quite well, what are the things they have in common that make a difference for them?
From the terms of FinOps?
Yeah, is it like specific practices that they do, or just the way the teams coordinate together, or
coordination? That is when it really thrives. One of the biggest, I think, risks for organizations in general, I'm not saying FinOps teams or procurement or anybody else, organization, in managing their cloud costs, is letting their internal teams compete.
Okay.
Competition between IT and cost savers in general, like put all cost savers in one place and IT. That is never going away. But seeing procurement versus FinOps versus SAM, I understand in the corporate culture where it comes from, but we see things not being done, thrown under the carpet because of those politics and competing teams competing for potentially the same targets, same bonuses. I save more. No, we save more. It works against the organization. It's never a benefit. You can't make those teams compete. It would be a ridiculous decision. Unfortunately, it is happening now. They must communicate. They must figure out those relationships and lines of communications. And something must be done at the organizational level to make sure that if one team performs better, the other one doesn't suffer, because that's what demotivates them. That's what creates those barriers, that alienation.
So it's almost like promoting the sharing of success stories so that people can kind of replicate it in a way is probably better than direct competition.
That is a very difficult task for high-level management, actually. Almost C-level. It's not easy. But if you solve it, you'll be spending less and getting more. It's up to you.
Yeah, it's that kind of value versus cost trade-off a little bit as well. It's like you might be paying more money and not getting the savings, but if you're getting the business value as a result, then you kind of...
Yeah, but that is what you're saying. That is about the conflict between IT, which is meted on uptime, latency, and whatnot. Fine, yes, there should be, and cost savings. What needs to be avoided is the competition between those cost-saving departments, because now there are many. So you have IT asset management that includes hardware asset management and software asset management, and many organizations have it. And by the way, what I noticed is that when there's mature FinOps, usually it grew out of mature SAM practice. And then we have FinOps now, and procurement with their own agenda. And everybody is kind of chasing cost savings and optimization and compliance. If they work together, success is almost guaranteed. If they start competing, success will be, I would say, I'm sorry, excuse my French, half-assed.
So do you think, like with that, there's definitely an element to me of, step one of that collaboration is at least understand other people's, where each of those other stakeholders are coming from. So, for example, like the procurement team, I think, one of the things that was really interesting in our last chat was you talked a bit about procurement teams, and there was a couple of things in there that I hadn't really thought about before about understanding, what is the driver for the procurement person? Because as a developer or an architect or a IT service manager, understanding that other person that you don't talk to very often, maybe a couple of times a year you're interacting with them, but at least if you understand a little bit of their job, it helps you have a better sort of overall outcome with those teams, doesn't it?
It does. And that needs to be agreed and clarified. I still don't believe that you can motivate every IT person to also look after the costs. It's because the way they meet it. You can establish mutual understanding. I wouldn't say at the low level, but at least at the kind of mid and high level, yes, you can establish mutual understanding, because effectively, it's not all about costs. Costs actually should be, to be honest, I think that in a modern organization, costs should be an afterthought. Otherwise, you won't be modern and quick, and what's what I'm looking for.
Sort of an agility of delivery.
Yes. So that is the first consideration, but costs should be somewhere around that as well. What necessarily be the top priority, even in crisis? I mean, God forbid, this could damage you so much if suddenly you see there's a recession and you put costs as the main target. That frugality could benefit some. Again, it's not a general statement, but if it's the only target, then you'll start losing on those IT metrics.
Yeah,
Redundancy. I've seen that in my IT career when we were discussing a project with a client with a remote data center in Europe, client sitting somewhere in Eastern Europe, and we told them that because of difficulty to access that data center and other considerations, you absolutely must have a high availability solution. And they said, no, we need to look after costs. And then in a month after that, some service failed, and it costed them more in terms of business losses and everything. So this cost should be an afterthought, obviously, but they should collaborate. And people reducing costs or managing costs, they should understand how IT thinks, and IT should understand how and why other teams are chasing cost savings, and not necessarily with the desire to suffocate IT and make it suffer.
So there's a really interesting point you brought up a couple of times actually now about something I've thought a little bit about on some of the projects I've worked on in the past, where cost as a non-functional requirement always feels a bit of a gap area for companies where, like as an architect for me, you're designing a solution and I've got to think about the functional requirements, but then if I'm lucky, I'll get like a small suite of non-functionals as well. And I think you mentioned, we've got latency requirements and high availability requirements, and I'll make design assumptions based on those. But it's very rare you get an actual running cost non-functional requirement, even if it's like a ranged budget you've got to play within, because that I think one of the things we see is often customers who 6 months after they go live say, oh, it costs me too much and I can't sustain this. But some of the design requirements they were made, design decisions they made never factored in that sustainability. So they'll design certain things that are hard to unpick later. And is that something you see a lot of in customers? And do you guys kind of try to encourage that earlier in the project so that you make the right decisions sooner?
It's always been, at least my personal mantra, that licensing your course design should be an integral part of the initial design. And it's not even a new practice, because I was born in the Soviet Union and I studied in a Soviet college, and my subject was heavy machinery, robotics, actually industrial robotics. And an integral part of the project is actually even ROI calculations. Even in Soviet Union, you may think it's a planned economy. It was very well planned. So you design a certain process, you design a certain tool, an improvement, a robot, an automated line. Economics, I think in my diploma, it was over 60% of the entire material, the economics around it. So it always must be, and for some reason it's not. I'm not saying everywhere, but in many cases, IT design goes first, and then others are then trying to fight that suddenly it's costing us too much. Again, that's a generalized statement. To an extent, that's a part of the process. But we've had to deal with the consequences of not fully grasping the importance of that so many times. So I think I've earned my right to sometimes generalize a little bit.
Yeah,
because it's just happening too often.
I think that the ROI calculator is so important, though, isn't it? I remember there was a project we worked on where it's you built a great solution, and then you find out that when the business actually looked at how often it was used, it was very different to what they originally sort of thought it would be used, and the ROI just didn't stack up, and you're almost worth just binning the solution later on if it's not being used the way it was intended. So Alexander, we're not a long way off time. Is there any questions I haven't brought up that you would really like to chat about topic-wise?
I want to say a thought. I think the most successful, I would say FinOps projects or FinOps practices, but the most successful cost-saving practices in FinOps, that niche in FinOps, were when the approach was taken to find a solution and convince the teams that you can at the same time improve performance, IT metrics, and reduce costs. If a FinOpser that understands both worlds, procurement, always chasing savings, or better services, I wouldn't say savings, chasing value, and IT chasing specific metrics, and if that FinOps team or that genius FinOpser can find the ways to satisfy both sides, that will be the most successful team or a person. And I'll give you an example. It's not a theory. In Azure, you still by default get 3rd generation virtual machines. If you compare performance with 5th generation, you can get a machine that's half the size of the 3rd generation machine, costing you less and performing better. And I'm not even making this up. All these performance metrics are published by Microsoft themselves. So just modernizing your virtual machines can at the same time reduce your costs and improve performance at the same time. That is the kind of a solution we should be looking for to be able to satisfy both worlds and both targets of every business.
Yeah, it's a really good one, because sometimes obviously line by line on your bill paying more, but you might get significantly more bang for it. So you might be able to get rid of one server because the other two have upgraded to a newer version, but they can do more. You don't need the third one, kind of thing. It's a really good shout, that. So we've got another podcast coming up in a couple of weeks' time. So if you had a question that you would like to ask that podcast guest, obviously you don't know who it's going to be yet, just a random question you'd like us to drop in for that person, what would you ask them?
Let me think.
And it could be technology, FinOps, process.
So it's an absolutely random.
Yeah, just something you would like hearing the answer to from somebody else who's similar to yourself.
It's a bit of a complicated question. How I would address it to that guest. How do you manage? How do you suggest to manage the fact that with the introduction of all the cloud payment options, pay-as-you-go, consumption, effectively traditional procurement processes don't protect businesses from overpayments and overspending anymore.
So let me just play that back then. So with the new cloud payment models, how do you as a consultant recommend companies protect the risk of overspend on new cloud billing?
Yeah, because the old procurement approaches, when you know upfront what you're going to pay for what, they don't work anymore. How in this reality do you maintain control and give procurement back its power, even if it's possible?
Yeah, I think that's a really great. We can simplify that question down a little bit. How do we give procurement back its power? I think's a really good tagline there, isn't it? That's a good question.
Yeah.
So, is there any last things you'd like to say before we wrap up at all, Alexander? I mean, I really appreciate you joining us and spending some of your valuable time on the podcast today.
If you manage Microsoft these days, please don't lose track of the changing billing models. The transition from the old commitments for a certain number of licenses to the new pay-as-you-go models, and really understand the reasons for that and how it affects not just the way you pay, but also the way you license and you manage that. Because now it's it's changing so rapidly.
It's even just keeping up to date with it, isn't it? I think that was a big thing when we chatted last time, was understanding like how much time you invest from Sam Expert in just keeping on top of understanding the detail of all of these changes, and then being able to translate them as to what they mean for an organization. I think it was a real testament to me of the value that kind of a licensing and cost expert brings to the table, which is really quite interesting.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
Cool. So thank you for joining us. For the audience, this is FinOps on a podcast. We'll have another episode coming out very soon, and if anybody would like to connect with Alexander to discuss things further about things you might have found interesting in today's podcast, Alexander, what's the best way for people to connect with you? Is it maybe LinkedIn?
Yeah, please find me on LinkedIn. That's the easiest, the best way.
Yeah, and then I'll do another shout out because your YouTube channel is really brilliant. So if anybody wants to learn more about Alexander, it's a great place to go and check out. And I think it's under the name Sam Expert. I think, Alexander,
it's Sam Expert TV.
Yeah, brilliant. So we'll share a link with that with some of the comms about the podcast.